1. My parents' house is modest but nice for the area it's in the north of England. When they chose the place back in the late 80s, they did so because it faces out onto a huge field, and in that area, greenery is in short supply. At the edge of the field, directly opposite their front door and window, is a dense line of old trees. During the day, they make for a beautiful view. At night, they realized fairly quickly that the darkness just beyond those trees can be quite creepy. Not long after they moved in, they were burgled, and were told by the police that in all likelihood, the burglars had been watching the house from that tree line for days to learn their routine and wait for an opening due to a clear knowledge of the house's layout. After that, my father installed a house alarm. In the early 2000s, he installed CCTV and a floodlight activated by motion sensors after a series of robberies in the area and some trouble with a group of local kids. The camera on the front captures their small garden, the dozen or so steps leading to the street, and a decent amount of the street beyond it. The floodlight normally activates if anybody gets anywhere past halfway down the steps. I went back to stay with my parents in autumn 2015 while I waited for my new apartment to be ready. They hadn't had any trouble from those kids for a long time, and there had been no reports of robberies in the area for about as long. Generally, it's the kind of place I'd walk at night without giving it a second's thought. Around 11 p.m. on my first night there, my father was out at work, and I was watching TV in the front room with my mother. Out of nowhere, there was a loud bang on the front window. I got up and went outside to investigate, and was annoyed to find that the floodlight wasn't working. Lying in front of the window was a huge pile of dirt and rocks that somebody had obviously thrown from the front street. I looked up and down the street but couldn't see anything. I looked out towards the line of darkened trees and again, nothing. But have you ever had one of those weird feelings, like there are eyes on you that you can't see? I couldn't shake it. After going back inside, I asked my mother if I should go check the CCTV recording, and she explained that it had stopped working years beforehand. But they'd left the very obvious camera housing in place as a deterrent. Smart, I thought, but not so useful in this kind of situation. And obviously not doing much as a deterrent either. She also explained that they switched off the floodlight because a bunch of local cats used to think it was hilarious to set it off all through the night. And although you couldn't tell from the living room due to all the indoor lights, it wasn't so fun from the upstairs rooms when it went off every 10 minutes and you were trying to sleep. The next day, my father decided it was time he replaced the camera, just in case anything like that happened again. He opted for one with infrared, so that you still get a decent view of the garden and street at night. He installed it, hooked it up to a DVR, and set it running from that night onwards. The thing was tiny, barely noticeable from the street, and on the opposite side of the house to the huge, obvious older camera housing. Again around 11 p.m. on night 2, there was another loud thud against the front window. This time me and my father went out to investigate. Again, nothing there except a pile of broken apart rocks and dirt which had been balled up and thrown. We went back inside, rewound the DVR by 5 minutes or so, and watched. Into view strolled the guy in a hoodie, with the hood pulled up to obscure his face. He walked parallel to the house until he was directly opposite the window and stopped. He turned to face the window and just stood there, staring at the closed blinds for a good 30 seconds. Then he reached into his pocket, pulled out what we assumed was the clump of dirt, threw it, and sprinted for the tree line opposite. We couldn't see how far in he went, but he slowed down just before dropping out of sight, so we assumed he was still there when we came outside, watching. As I said, my parents dealt with this kind of crap from local kids for a long time, and they naturally assumed that's what they were dealing with again. One of the kids, No longer a kid, but an adult who hadn't done much growing up. Still occasionally yelled things at them in the street. So he was prime suspect. They agreed to switch the floodlight back on as an extra deterrent. The next day, my father dropped into the local police station and asked their advice on what had happened. Since there was no real damage done, after a quick scrub the windows were as good as new. And the footage didn't capture a face. They said there was nothing they could do, but advised him to monitor the situation and come back if things escalated. That night, 11 p.m. came and went, and nothing. I remember my mother making a comment to the effect of being glad that whoever it was had obviously got bored and found something more interesting to do. Satisfied that nothing was going to happen, I had a quick cigarette at the front door, scanning the tree line as best I could through the darkness just in case, and went to bed. The next morning, I woke up early and looked out of the bedroom window to the front garden. The gate leading to the steps was wide open, and I couldn't remember if it had been the night before. My mother was obsessed with it being kept closed and always complained about the postman leaving it open, so I assumed he must have done it. When I got downstairs, there was no post waiting on the doormat. Not exactly damning evidence of anything, but it prompted me to check the DVR. I rewound it a couple of hours, and the whole time the gate was open, but no postman, or anyone else for that matter. I kept going. 4 a.m., 2 a.m., midnight, open the whole time. As I rewound it all the way to 11 p.m. the night before, I saw a flurry of rapid movement on the recording. I played from 11 p.m. The gate was closed. Around 11:15 p.m., a pair of headlights came around the corner at the end of the street, and a large white van slowly pulled into view. It slowed more and more until it got level with the house and stopped. Out of it climbed the guy in the hoodie, again with the hood pulled up to cover his face. He reached across to the passenger seat and pulled out a heavy-looking bat, going off how it dropped as he slid it out of the van. Gently closed the van door and walked straight for the front gate. He lifted the gate slowly from its catch and swung it open, making sure it didn't hit anything. Then he took a few steps down towards the door, cautiously. He stopped, looked around to make sure nobody was coming, and took a few more steps. Again he stopped, checked, and was obviously satisfied that he wasn't going to be confronted. Unfortunately for him, he took one more step and reached the halfway point on the stairs. On went the floodlight, lighting up the garden and our unwelcome guest. He froze again, clearly unsure what to do. Then he looked down at the bag in his hand and turned his face up to look directly into the camera lens. The angle of both the floodlight and the camera meant I got a good look at just the bottom half of his face, and the big grin plastered all over it. And just like that, he turned around, strolled back up the steps, and got into his van. With him gone, the floodlight switched itself off again. Except he didn't leave. I watched the headlights get smaller as he reversed back the way he came, and stopped at the end of the street just within view. Then he turned off the engine and waited. At this point, I'd totally forgotten the sequence of events from the previous night, and felt a shot of ice go down my back when I saw a sliver of light appear as I opened the door and stepped just outside of it for a cigarette. I stood there, obviously scanning the trees in front of me, while 50 yards to my left, this guy sat watching. I disappeared back inside. A few minutes passed, and the headlights flashed back to life, growing closer again. The van appeared behind them, crawling back towards the house. It got right outside again, stopped for just a second, and then pulled away out of shot. Understandably freaked out, I told my parents and asked my father to go back to the police and tell them that we now had a trespasser. He did. Their response? That it was probably just somebody looking for directions, and in any event, without any way of getting an ID, at no point were the van's license plates clearly visible enough to read because of the headlights. It would be a waste of their time. They didn't even want to see the footage. Nice. We monitored the CCTV for the weeks I was there afterwards, but our nighttime visitor never came back. No idea what he wanted, why he was watching the house, testing our reactions, came calling when he knew we were all home, or why he specifically targeted us in a row of terraced properties. But after getting a look at that smile, I'm glad I didn't decide to go for a smoke a few minutes earlier that night. So, creepy trespasser, let's not meet. Just to preempt any requests, I saw my parents today, and the footage has been overwritten. They keep the recording going 24/7 now, and the DVR only has so much space. Sorry. 2. So I am a college freshman in the South. I'm also a female. Before I begin this story, I'd like to give a description of myself. I'm a short, chubby black female. When I say short, I believe I am just underneath the average height, 5'4". Anyway, my college was across the street from a run-down gas station, where I happened to work. On a night that I was working, my boss left me alone for the night because he hadn't gotten any sleep. Or so that is what he said. But it was a pretty slow day. There wasn't a specific reason why it was slow, it just was. Anyway, I was playing Geometry Dash on my phone as I sat behind the counter. It wasn't a counter with the thick glass and speaking tube. It was just a regular counter. As I played my game, I heard the door open, with the little chime from the bells. I looked up to see a man, about average height and very skinny, but for some reason a little intimidating. I was never the one to be afraid of anyone, so when I say he was intimidating, he was. He was balding, with a little comb-over. He had on a dingy white t-shirt with holes and dad jeans that were caked in a dark red substance, and mud. He seemed as if he had just went hunting, but I'm not sure. He looked at me. His eyes were hollow and empty. But still, I smiled. "Hello, how are you?" Common southern hospitality. He muttered something, I couldn't hear him, and went to the back of the store. I watched him for a while before I eventually had gotten bored and went back to my game. After about a minute of aggravation, I clicked off the game and went to scroll down Instagram. When I glanced up, he was standing behind the aisle, just watching me. Upon reflex, I put my head back down, looking at my phone, but something told me to look back up. When I did, he was standing at the counter, holding gummy worms and a beer. Did you find everything okay, sir?" I say, a little startled, but I was okay. He didn't say anything. He just dug through his pockets and pulled out a dirty $10 bill. The total is $5.68, I say, as I grabbed the money, smiling at him. After I handed him back his change, out of nowhere he shouts, "I hit all you N-words. You and the damn wetbacks." Taken aback by his comment, I couldn't say anything. I was just stunned. "Aw, you don't got nothing to say, huh? You N-words always have something to say. Never know when to shut your damn mouths. I swear to God, if I could hang you, I would." I gasped, and was about to tell him to get his fucking worms in a can of spit and get the fuck out. I call beers a can of spit with pennies in it, because that's what it tastes like. But a few college guys burst through the damn door, alerting the both of us. He grabbed his shit and walked out. Luckily, I knew one of the college students. "Hey there," he smiled, bringing me some Doritos and an Arizona iced tea. I guess the look on my face gave him an idea of how I was feeling. "You okay?" he asked. I shook my head. No, that man that walked out said he wished he could hang me. He started off with these racist comments. I didn't even do anything, I told him. I wasn't crying. I was just really mad. My friend asked me if he should go look for him. I told him no. "I'll be fine," I assured him. He nodded and asked for a pen and paper. I ripped a piece of receipt paper off and handed him the counter pen. "Okay, call me if you need me," he says, writing his phone number down. His other friends came around with a bunch of food, and after that, they were on their way. After about 2 hours or so, my boss and another co-worker came in, which means that I was off. I gathered my things, forgetting about the whole incident, and told them good day. I left and began my journey across the street. After about a good mile or so, I heard someone yell, "Hey, sir, there a reason for you to be here tonight?" I looked back to see campus security talking to a lanky man. My eyes began to focus into the darkness, when I noticed it was a racist guy from the station. His eyes were locked on me, and it made me even more uncomfortable. He didn't respond, which made it menacing enough for me to leave. I began to walk quicker to my dorm and just forget about the whole thing. He was caught. I was okay. Nothing else happened. The next day in the Union Center, I was doing some homework at a table and listening to some music, when the guy that I know sat down. "Hey, I'm glad you made it back okay." He smiles. I nodded. "Yeah, thanks," he sighs, "because they found some guy on the campus last night with a pistol and hunting knife." My stomach dropped when he said that. It was this skinny white man. He kept mumbling some petty racist shit under his breath. "So I thought that was the guy that you told me about last night," he finished. I told him that I think it was, and that he was following me back to my dorm last night. As I thought, he was also stunned for words. "So fucked up, racist, dickhead, weirdo. Let's not meet, okay?" 3. My encounter took place in the early spring last year. The evenings had started to get a little lighter, so providing I left work on time, I get to see that last little bit of light. Sadly, I am a nurse working at the local hospital, so leaving on time is rare. Anyway, on this particular day, there had been an emergency on the ward, and I ended up leaving about an hour and a half later than I should have. I walked out the back entrance of the hospital, near where they bring all the deliveries, as I always do, and I noticed a man standing in the middle of the road smoking. Now, this alone didn't really cause me to be worried, as this entrance leads straight to a residential area, and assumed he was visiting someone with a no smoking policy in their house. It was about 10 p.m., very dark, and so all I could make out was the fact that he was a man with dark hair, thanks to the streetlight a little further down the street. As I walked closer, all I could smell was the cigarette he was smoking, and could see him attempting to sneak glances at me. This made me a little uncomfortable, but I figured I was obviously doing the same thing to him for me to notice this in the first place. So I put my big girl pants on, kept my eyes averted, and walked past him. As I turned left onto another residential street, with a huge park on the other side of the road, to me, I could smell cigarette smoke again. I glanced behind me, and guess who was there? The same guy, still smoking away. He gave me a creepy smile and put his cigarette out on the pavement. I'd like to mention that he had managed to come up behind me and be at arm's length without me even noticing. I'd like to put it down to how stealthy and fast he had crept up on me, but the reality is I just wasn't paying attention. After a 13-hour shift, I was exhausted, and as a nurse, I always think back to what had happened at work. Did I do the right thing? If I had done something different, would a certain patient's outcome be different? Had I told the family of the man with terminal cancer the right way? So you see, I was too wrapped up in my own thoughts. Walking a route I had taken 1,000 times. That, combined with the fact that it only takes me about 15 minutes to get home, I had managed to convince myself I was safe. Anyway, I decided to still give this guy the benefit of the doubt by slowing my pace so that he could pass me on the pavement. But he just slowed down to match. This is when the alarm bells really started ringing. I should mention that my route home involves an alley that has only 2 streetlights that never work, and is rather narrow, allowing only one person to walk down it at any one time. It runs along the back of more residential streets, and mine is the second one you come to. I kept glancing behind me, and he was still walking close to me and smiling. I sped up my pace, so did he. I slowed again, and he does exactly the same. Now I'm freaking the fuck out. I was getting closer to the alley that I always walk down, and needed to decide fast if I was going to risk that way, or should I carry on down this road, which is pretty long, to a fairly main road at the end. When I say main road, it's just a road that leads to the town centre that has a few shops along it, that are all closed by this time at night, and the odd car driving along it. While I was trying to decide what way to go, I know, only idiots take an alley when they think they're being followed. I felt him touch my arm and try to pull me around to face him. By now, I was only a few steps away from the alley, so I yanked my arm from his grip and ran like a bat out of hell down this alley. The first streetlight, that is at the top of the first road, wasn't working. And I know what you're thinking. I should have ran down that road and knocked on someone's door for help. But all I could think about was getting home and being able to put a locked door between me and this guy. I could hear him running after me, his feet hitting the ground and his breathing behind me. Now, like I said, I always walk this way, and the left side has big bushes, trees and weeds, etc., that get so overgrown that they start taking over the walkway. I knew that one of the tree's branches had grown over, and while I was short enough to run under it without incident, I was praying he wasn't. He was starting to gain on me, and I knew I was getting tired and slowing. People always talk about how in these kinds of situations they get a huge adrenaline rush and can run for ages to get out of harm's way. Not sure if I'm just missing that, or if I was just too tired to keep going for that long. I'm still going, and feel the tree branch brush the top of my head, and about 5 seconds later, I hear it smack into him, and he starts shouting and swearing. I am not at all far from where the alley meets the top of my road. Thankfully, the light is working here, so I can see clearly. I can hear his footfalls getting closer as I run down my road. I live about halfway down, and as I reach my house, I realize I can't hear him anymore. So, naturally, I do another stupid thing. I slow right down and turn around. He was standing under the streetlight, with the same creepy smile on his face, and waves. That undid me completely. I am crying like a baby now, and trying to catch my breath as I fight the lock on my door, but eventually get into my house and lock it again. I close the curtains downstairs and take the knife from the kitchen upstairs with me and my dogs. Thankfully, nothing else happened. He didn't make a move to follow me when I turned to look at him, but I didn't want to be unprepared if he changed his mind. I'd also like to add I live in the middle of a row of terraced houses that all look the same, so the chances of him finding my house again would be very unlikely. I have no idea what he was going to do to me, if anything. He could have just got a kick out of freaking me the fuck out. I never reported it to the police, but a few weeks later, I read in our local paper about a man who tried to attack another woman 4 streets away from me. They caught the guy, but I never knew if it was the same person. If it was, then I am truly sorry for not going to the police, as I could have stopped that happening to her. So, Creepy Smiler, let's not meet again. Hey everyone, Hellfreezer here, and thank you very much for listening to 3 True Scary Stories, episode 96. I'd like to thank you all very kindly for the questions you've sent in for the Q&A. I think I've got about enough now. I'm going to start sorting through the comments and everything, and I'll guess screen caps or whatever I'll do, and I'll get them all laid out and prepare to record that. I hope no one minds that I censored the second story a little bit. If you read the original text, you can see what was originally said. As and when I'm recording this, I'm not actually sure when it's going to go up, because there was an issue with my paranormal video, so you may be getting this on Friday. If you are getting it on Friday, then I apologize. I've almost got everything I need for the paranormal video, so it should be up next week. And I'm still not sure what's going to be up on Saturday. Something though, don't worry, something. Maybe paranormal, who knows? Okay, so until next time, thank you very much for listening, and take very good care of yourselves.